In 1983, Gene Simmons met Shannon Tweed at the Playboy Mansion. It took him 28 years to marry her, but their 2011 wedding wasn't about love. It was about covering up a scandal that almost destroyed his family. Recently discovered footage from their reality show reveals conversations that were never meant to be public. His son was caught in a plagiarism scandal. Legal documents from 2025 mention incidents involving female employees. The man who claimed to have slept with 4,800 women is now facing consequences that go far beyond his wild reputation. Gene Simmons wasn't always Gene Simmons. He was born as Chaim Witz on August 25, 1949, in Haifa, Israel. His mother, Flora Klein, had just survived hell. She was born in Hungary in 1925 and had barely escaped the Nazi concentration camps. His father, Ferenc Yohil Witz, also escaped Hungary and married Flora in 1946. They moved to Israel in 1947, just before the state was born, with British forces still blocking the way. Their past was full of pain, and that pain quietly echoed through everything Chaim would become. By the time he turned 6 in 1955, things got worse. His parents' marriage broke apart, mostly because they didn't have money. His father stayed in Israel. His mother raised him alone in Tirat Carmel. She worked nearly every day in factories, sewing buttons, just to feed them. Sometimes they only had bread and milk for dinner. At age 7, Chaim was already trying to help. He picked wild fruit with a friend and sold it by the roadside. He knew what struggle meant. He made his first winter coat out of an army blanket. The cold didn't care, but he had no other choice. His mother worked until late at night, and he often cried himself to sleep in an empty house. At school, it didn't get any easier. Other kids bullied him for being different. Even in post-war Israel, some of the hate his mother had escaped followed him into the classroom. But something else found him too. Comic books, American ones, Spider-Man, Superman. They became his escape. He couldn't even read English yet, but he tried anyway. By age 7, he was already speaking Hebrew, Hungarian, and Turkish. And now he was secretly picking up English too. All because he wanted to understand the heroes in those comics. In a world still healing from war, where food was limited and hope felt rare, those stories gave him something to hold on to. His mother didn't talk much about what she'd been through, but the pain was always there. By 1957, Chaim had started to see it more clearly. She had been just 14 when the Nazis forced her into labor, picking potatoes in fields while soldiers watched with guns. She wore clothes marked with crosses, moving between camps, watching her world vanish one relative at a time. She didn't need to explain it with words. Her silence, her overprotectiveness, and the way she sometimes cried without reason, Chaim understood. It left something in him too, a need to never feel weak, to never let anyone see him break. That same year, in 1957, Flora made a decision that would change everything. With barely anything to her name, she and 8-year-old Chaim left Israel. They arrived in Queens, New York, with no money, no English, and no family waiting. His father stayed behind, remarried, and started a new life. Chaim never saw him again. He became Eugene Klein and started over. Flush toilets and TV dinners amazed him. But adapting wasn't easy. Flora worked long hours in Brooklyn factories, sometimes 15 hours a day. Gene had to take care of himself with babysitters and learn the rules of a strange new world. He went to a Jewish school for a while, but he didn't fit in. Then he switched to public school. He graduated from Newtown High in 1967. At first, kids teased him for how he talked. His accent made him feel like a stranger everywhere he went, but he didn't let it break him. He sold cactuses door to door. He picked fruit again, just like he did in Israel. Every insult, every rejection, it made him try harder. He started learning English faster by watching TV and reading more comics. That's when his obsession with pop culture exploded. By 1959, at just 9 years old, he legally changed his name again, this time to Gene Klein. He picked Gene after cowboy actors like Gene Autry. He was all in on being American now, even if he still lived in a cramped apartment with his mother and cousins. He fell in love with television, especially The Ed Sullivan Show. When the Beatles appeared on February 9th, 1964, something inside him lit up. He wanted that life. He wanted the stage, the fame. He wanted to feel like someone. But inside, he still felt like the boy with nothing. He even pretended to be British sometimes, copying the Beatles' accents just to fit in. Girls liked it. He was awkward, unsure, going through the messy changes of being a teenager. But his charm was slowly growing. During the 1960s, Gene took whatever job he could find. He worked in butcher shops, slicing meat. He worked in delis, behind the counter. He earned just $1 $1,025 an hour, but he saved every bit of it. Poverty had taught him to count every cent. He stayed away from alcohol, even at parties. He noticed how older guys got drunk and sloppy. He stayed sharp. That's how he got girls. He said it himself. He used his clarity while everyone else lost theirs. He started learning guitar, practicing constantly. After seeing the Beatles on TV, he couldn't stop. He formed little bands and started building his future while still in school. In 1968, he went to Sullivan County Community College. He studied education, got an associate degree by 1970, and even taught 6th grade in Spanish Harlem for $75 a week. But his heart wasn't in the classroom. He joined up with Paul Stanley and formed a band called Rainbow, which soon became Wicked Lester in 1970. They played at clubs at night, worked other jobs during the day. Gene even worked at a fashion magazine. He also did translation gigs using the Hungarian, Turkish, and Spanish he'd picked up as a kid from babysitters and neighbors. But music was where his soul lived. He tried different sounds, even recorded some solo songs under his name. All the while, he was sending money back to his mother, still carrying the weight of her survival and everything she'd lost in 1945. Then there was the part of his story that shocked even his fans. Gene Simmons says he lost his virginity at almost 14 years old in 1963. He was just a kid on a newspaper route. One winter evening, right before Christmas, he knocked on a customer's door. She answered, crying, wearing only a thin nightgown. She was a married woman. What happened next, he later described in detail in his book. It wasn't just the beginning of his sex life. In 1970, Gene Simmons teamed up with Paul Stanley. Along with Steve Coronel, Brooke Ostrander, and Tony Zarella, they formed a band called Wicked Lester. The sound was a strange mix of folk and rock, born out of the unpredictable music scene in New York City. By October 15, 1972, they had recorded a full album at Electric Lady Studios, which had been built by Jimi Hendrix. Epic Records had paid a lot to make it happen, but their A&R director, Don Ellis, absolutely hated it. He called the sound too messy and too strange for radio, so he shelved it forever. That rejection hit Gene hard. He'd poured himself into the project, and now it was dead before it even began. Furious, Gene and Paul fired Steve Coronel, brought in Ron Lejack for a short time, and then shut down Wicked Lester entirely. But that wasn't the end. After Kiss became famous, Gene and Paul paid $138,000 in 1977 to buy back the old Wicked Lester tapes, just to make sure they never got released. They feared the old sound would ruin the hard-edged image they were now building. Still, bootlegs leaked online later, revealing songs like She and Love Her All I Can, which Kiss would later re-record without crediting the original lineup. That failed band gave birth to something bigger. By January 1973, Gene and Paul were done with compromise. They found a Rolling Stone ad placed by Peter Criss, a seasoned drummer from bands like Lips and Chelsea. He joined quickly. Then they found Ace Frehley through a Village Voice ad. Together, the four of them created something entirely new. This wasn't going to be a regular rock band. It was going to be a wild, over-the-top show with makeup, fire, and fantasy. Inspired by the shock rock of Alice Cooper and the glam style of New York Dolls, they launched Kiss. Their first show took place on January 30th, 1973, at a small club in Queens called the Coventry, which used to be called the Popcorn Club. Only 3 people showed up, some of them girlfriends of the band, but that night, Gene breathed fire on stage for the first time. It was a spectacle nobody forgot. Without a single hit song or any airtime on MTV, they built a following. Word spread through fan magazines and live shows, not through the radio. Within 18 months, they were headlining Anaheim Stadium in 1974. Gene later said their makeup was so strange and unforgettable that it just stuck in people's minds. It was raw, it was weird, and it was spreading. In 1973, Gene created The Demon, inspired by horror films like Black Sabbath and comic book characters like Black Bolt. He painted bat wings around his eyes and started breathing fire and spitting blood on stage. He had learned the tricks from a professional. When the band first started experimenting with makeup, they had no real plan. Gene went for horror. Peter drew whiskers on his face like a cat. Ace made himself into a space alien. They stood in front of mirrors, painting wildly, trying to make something nobody had seen before. Their early shows barely drew a dozen people. At the Coventry, crowds ranged from 10 to 15, sometimes fewer. But those few people left talking. Even before the internet, kids were spreading the word. Gene said it felt sticky and strange, but it was working. That makeup and fire and blood turned frustration into to fascination. They didn't need a radio hit. They just needed to be unforgettable. In August 1973, a man named Bill Aucoin saw Kiss play at the Hotel Diplomat. He believed in them so much that he promised to get them a record deal within 2 weeks, and he did. By November 1st, they had signed with Casablanca Records, a brand new label run by Neil Bogart. Peter Criss was so excited when he heard the news that he literally fell off his platform heels. The band quickly recorded their first album, with help from producer Eddie Kramer. It was released on February 18, 1974. Sales were slow at first, only 75,000 copies, but the band didn't stop. They played over 300 shows that year. Casablanca Records was nearly bankrupt, but Kiss's constant touring kept them alive. Neil Bogart doubted their makeup gimmick at first, but when he saw the crowds growing, he knew it was working. By 1975, they were filling stadiums, all without a single major radio hit. Gene called it a gamble that turned them into legends. During those early years, Gene developed a strange habit. He began taking Polaroid photos of his sexual encounters. Each woman had to hold up the hotel key as proof. Over the years, he claimed to have taken nearly 5,000 of these photos, boasting in interviews that he had slept with more than 4,600 women. He even showed the photos to friends and guests. Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane called it disgusting. Gene kept them all locked in a box. His wife Shannon Tweed found them after their 2011 marriage and burned them live on their reality show, ending that chapter of his life. While Gene never touched drugs, his sex addiction became part of his wild onstage persona. From small clubs to massive stadiums, he turned chaos into a performance and into power. Everything changed on September 10, 1975. That's when they released the live album, Alive. It was loud, unfiltered, and filled with the madness of their shows. You could hear the fire, the screams, and the blood in every track. Songs were recorded in places like Detroit, Cleveland, Wildwood, and Davenport throughout that year. On May 16th, June 21st, July 20th, and July 23rd. The album went quadruple platinum, selling over 4 million copies. It reached number 9 on the Billboard charts and stayed there for 110 weeks. That record saved Casablanca from going under. There was even a lawsuit against Neil Bogart at the time, and Kiss's success pulled the label back from the edge. The album title, Alive, was a nod to Slade's 1972 live album, which had inspired them. It was proof that the makeup, the fire, the madness, it all worked. Suddenly, they weren't just a strange band. They were the future of rock. In 1976, they pushed further. Destroyer came out on March 15th, with producer Bob Ezrin at the helm. He added strings, a choir of children, reversed drum sounds and sound effects, shouted out loud, hit number 31 on the Billboard Hot 100. Gene's song God of Thunder was filled with screams and darkness, but Ezrin didn't make it easy. When the band gave him 15 demo tracks in August 1975, he threw out almost all of them. He rewrote their songs, rearranged the music, and even played the bass himself on Detroit Rock City. Some tracks stole ideas from classical music, like Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique, sampled for Great Expectations. Rehearsals began in August 1975 during a break in the Alive tour, and recording sessions continued at Electric Lady Studios through September and January. Gene's ego grew with each success, and while Ezrin polished the sound, Gene made sure his own persona stayed front and center. By the late 1970s, the tours became more than just concerts. They were full-blown spectacles. The Dynasty Tour in 1979 ran from June 15th to December 16th, with Gene flying across the stage and Ace Frehley's guitar shooting rockets at smoke-spewing props. Their technician, John Elder Robeson, created these jaw-dropping effects. They played 92 shows across North America, but cracks were showing. Some venues were too empty, like the canceled Pontiac Silverdome shows or the downsized Los Angeles gigs. Peter Criss was struggling. His drug use got worse. He started sabotaging shows, stopping drumming mid-performance just to lash out. Gene called it self-destruction. By the final show in Toledo, on December 16, 1979, it was clear the original band was falling apart. Fans felt the shift, and disco had crept into their sound. Families started coming to shows instead of hardcore rock fans. Gene kept flying, but the band was coming down fast. In 1978, everything got stranger. NBC aired a bizarre TV movie called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park on October 28th. It was produced by Hanna-Barbera, the same people behind Scooby-Doo. Kiss played themselves, superheroes battling an evil inventor in a theme park. Gene improvised lines about world domination, echoing his real-life plan to turn Kiss into a global brand. The acting was terrible, and fans hated it. Gene loved the attention, but the rest of the band tried to pretend it never happened. The movie was so embarrassing that people on set were banned from bringing it up later. Still, it became a cult classic, especially in Europe, where it was renamed Attack of the Phantoms. The project proved that Gene's ego wasn't just big, it was unstoppable. That same year, all 4 members released solo albums on September 18th. Gene's record outsold some of Kiss's actual group albums. It included strange covers like When You Wish Upon a Star and guest appearances from Cher and Bob Seger. His songs talked about radioactivity and twisted fantasies. Meanwhile, Kiss released Dynasty on May 23, 1979, with I Was Made for Lovin' You reaching number 11 on the Billboard charts. It sold over 1 million copies and went platinum in 5 countries. But the disco influence hurt their image. Rock fans walked away, and ticket sales collapsed. Venues shrank. The magic was fading. Peter Criss played drums on only one track before quitting for good. The Cracks had become splits. On September 18, 1983, Kiss did the unthinkable. They took off their makeup live on MTV. After 10 years of mystery, they revealed their real faces. At the same time, they released Lick It Up, which went platinum with over 1 million copies sold. The sound was heavier, rawer, more aggressive. The gamble worked. Sales jumped, and fans came back. Gene saw it as a rebirth. By then, Kiss had over 100 licensed products, from action figures to lunchboxes, making millions in merch. The masks were gone, but the business was booming. In 1984, Gene took a break from music and stepped into Hollywood. He played the villain Luther in the sci-fi thriller Runaway, directed by Michael Crichton. He was a mad scientist who used killer robots to murder people. Drawing from his demon character, Gene delivered lines with dramatic flair and died at the hands of his own creations. Meanwhile, back in the band, Peter Criss had been fired in 1980 after his addiction got out of control. Gene called it a necessary amputation. Eric Carr stepped in as the new drummer, known as the Fox. It was a painful loss, but it helped them start fresh. In 1989, Kiss released Hot in the Shade, with the ballad Forever hitting number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sold over 500,000 copies and became their biggest hit in the no-makeup years, but the sound was soft, more romantic than rebellious. Fans were confused, but the sales said otherwise. Behind the scenes, Gene was still chasing women. His affairs disrupted the band's work. He missed sessions. He picked Hollywood over rehearsals. Eric Carr sang his first lead vocal on Little Caesar, but it would be his last album before his death in 1991. Gene's distractions nearly tore everything apart. In his 2001 autobiography, Kiss and Makeup, Gene revealed the full truth. He had slept with over 4,800 women during his time in the band. One of the wildest stories came from the late 70s. He was dating Cher between 1979 and 1980, but ended up falling for her best friend, Diana Ross. It started with a simple Christmas shopping trip and turned into a full-blown love triangle. Cher never forgave them. The scandal blew up in People magazine, and it became one of the most famous betrayals in rock history. Gene stayed friends with both women, but the damage was permanent. Then came the biggest twist of all. In 1996, the original members of Kiss reunited. The makeup returned. The shows sold out everywhere. They performed in 75 cities, played 92 shows, and sold 1.2 million tickets. The tour made $143 million. But behind the scenes, things were tense. Fraley and Chris were paid flat rates of $80,000 per show, while Gene and Paul took $110,000 plus profits. Lawsuits followed. Old wounds reopened. The success was real, but so were the problems. Even as they broke records, they were breaking apart again. From 2006 to 2012, Gene Simmons let cameras follow him in a reality show called Gene Simmons Family Jewels. It gave fans a front-row seat into his home life with his longtime partner, Shannon Tweed, and their 2 children, Nick and Sophie. The show ran for 7 seasons and became A&E's second biggest hit after Dog the Bounty Hunter. While the series painted a picture of a softer, more family-focused Simmons, it left out most of his wild past. Then, in 2008, a sex tape surfaced showing him with another woman. He took legal action, calling it a violation of privacy. But the biggest twist came in 2011, when, after 28 years of avoiding it, Gene finally married Shannon. The wedding made headlines. Some viewers criticized the show for staging over-the-top moments, including a fake deal to buy an Australian football team, but it still managed to humanize a man once known only for makeup and mayhem. Gene's business business empire kept growing. By the 2000s, he had slapped the KISS logo onto over 5,000 products. You could find it on everything from pinball machines to condoms to even coffins. The brand was everywhere. Sales topped $1 billion. But then, in 2017, he went one step too far. Gene tried to trademark the famous devil horns hand gesture, claiming he invented it back in 1974. His filing described it as a pose with the index and pinky fingers up and thumb out, similar to the American Sign Language sign for I love you. The backlash was instant. Metal fans were furious. Critics reminded him that people like John Lennon and Ronnie James Dio had been using the gesture long before KISS. Just days later, Gene dropped the attempt, but the stunt made it clear how far he was willing to go for control. Trouble followed him into other areas too. In 2010, Gene was sued by ESPN makeup artist Victoria Jackson, who claimed he behaved inappropriately during a 2009 SportsCenter appearance while in full costume. She said he hugged and humped her. Gene denied it, saying his metal codpiece made that impossible. He even filed a countersuit to clear his name. The case was eventually settled, but that wasn't the only time he faced legal trouble. In 2016, a dishwasher at his Rock and Brews restaurant accused him of groping her. Another woman made a similar claim in 2017. Both cases were quietly resolved by 2018. Though he often dismissed these lawsuits as baseless, they added up and hinted at a troubling pattern. Despite everything, his fortune continued to grow. By 2015, Gene Simmons was worth more than $400 million. That didn't just come from music. It came from the mountains of KISS merch, over 100 million albums sold, and non-stop tours. In 2012, he and Paul Stanley launched a restaurant chain called Rock and Brews, which grew to multiple locations. He also got involved in unusual ventures like The Vault, a $2,000 compilation of rare recordings released in 2017, and in 2018, he joined a cannabis company called Invictus MD as Chief Evangelist Officer. He bought into the LA KISS Arena football team in 2013, which folded after a few years, and by 2025, his solo tour alone brought in 6 figures per show, without even needing the full KISS setup. His relationship with Shannon Tweed began in 1983 at the Playboy Mansion. Shannon, who had been named Playmate of the Year in 1982, entered Gene's world knowing he had a reputation. He claimed nearly 5,000 lovers by 2002, but they still built a life together. Their son Nick was born in 1989, and their daughter Sophie in 1992. Gene would joke that marriage was a trap, quoting Groucho Marx, but his behavior eventually pushed Shannon too far. In 2011, she stormed off the Joy Behar show, calling him a pig. Later that year, she found his collection of explicit Polaroids and burned them on air. That moment shocked fans, but something changed. Gene proposed to her in Belize on July 26, 2011, and they got married on October 1st. Nick was a groomsman and Sophie the maid of honor. It was emotional and unexpected, especially after 28 years of resisting. Their reality show didn't hide the tension. The turning point came in season 6, after a photo of Gene with 2 models at a Santa Monica event in 2009 caused Shannon to temporarily walk out. The show followed them into therapy, where she said she never agreed to be in an open relationship and felt blindsided. Gene finally opened up, admitting he had deep fears of commitment because of his childhood. The moment he asked her to marry him caught everyone off guard. The show ran for 167 episodes and pulled back the curtain on more than just their relationship. It showed the pain and pressure behind the fame. In 2018, Gene's tough guy image cracked. His mother, Flora Klein, passed away on December 5th at the age of 93. She was a Holocaust survivor who had endured the horrors of Nazi camps and lost her own mother in a gas chamber. After immigrating to Israel and then to New York in 1958, she raised Gene alone. He always credited her with shaping his values. Her death shook him. On Instagram, he called her his moral compass and urged people to cherish their mothers. His wife Shannon called her the best grandmother, and Paul Stanley described her as fiercely loving. For once, fans saw Gene without the mask. Even his children weren't spared the spotlight. In 2010, his son Nick got into trouble over his comic book Incarnate, which was accused of plagiarizing the Japanese manga Bleach. Fans showed exact panel comparisons and demanded accountability. The publisher pulled the comic, and Nick apologized, saying it was meant as homage. But the backlash didn't go away. Critics said the artwork was amateur and the copying too obvious. Gene defended his son, but the incident incident damaged Nick's credibility as a creator and followed him onto their reality show. Gene's habit of saying exactly what he thinks sparked more trouble in 2024. On October 8th, during a guest appearance on Dancing with the Stars, he made comments about female dancers that many called creepy. Instead of focusing on their performances, he kept talking about how beautiful they looked. One comment about Chandler Kinney fogging up his glasses went viral for all the wrong reasons. Social media erupted, calling him the gross uncle, and people demanded ABC apologize. Gene didn't back down. In an October 10th interview, he said he stood by every word. Then came the fan package in April 2025. For $12,495, not including the ticket, fans could join the ultimate Gene Simmons experience, where they'd act as his roadie for a day. They'd get to help with sound check, eat backstage, and even be introduced on stage, plus receive a signed bass guitar. Critics tore it apart, calling it shameless and tone-deaf, especially during tough economic times. But the package sold out. One fan, a retired soldier, paid for the experience and said it was worth every penny. Still, the stunt reignited debates over celebrity greed, especially considering Gene's wealth. The controversy didn't stop there. On August 13, 2025, President Trump announced that Kiss would receive the Kennedy Center honors. Fans were confused. Just 3 years earlier, Gene had blasted Trump in interviews, calling him abhorrent for spreading hate. After January 6th, he even compared Trump's rise to cockroaches coming out of the walls. But now the band was accepting an award from him. The internet exploded with memes and accusations of hypocrisy. Simmons didn't comment, but the silence said a lot. In 2025, Simmons also took his solo act on the road again. At the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally on August 3rd, he performed without the usual Kiss armor, telling stories from his 50-year career. But not everyone was happy. Some tickets cost over $500, and the VIP package rubbed people the wrong way. By March 23rd, several dates were canceled due to low sales. Fans felt he had gone too far, prioritizing profit over the fans who made him. Still, Gene insisted things were easier now without the giant Kiss setup. When Ozzy Osbourne died on July 23, 2025, Gene broke down during an interview on CBS Mornings. He remembered how Kiss opened for Black Sabbath in 1975 and spoke about Ozzy as a genuine ego-free soul. He even revealed that Kiss once turned down a tour with Sabbath in the 70s because of their heavy drug use. Simmons wanted to keep his band's image clean. That detail stunned fans. For all his shock value and wild image, Gene Simmons had always kept a tight grip on control.